We're pretty lucky as mountain bikers with the respect that the kit is pretty durable and tough these days, but it still does require basic maintenance in order to avoid those costly repairs further down the line. Now, although wheels are one of those fundamental parts of a bike that you can't ignore, most people do actually ignore them until something happens. So today we're going to be looking at wheel care, everything you need to do in order to keep on rolling. There are a lot of parts of the wheel that can let you down on a ride, so we're going to look at each part of them. So there are rims, there's spokes, there's the freehub body, which is underneath the cassette, there's the bearings on the inside, and of course there's the axles as well. Now this is the first thing you need to have a little feel of before you start looking and inspecting the rims. Now you want to be feeling your axles, and what you're looking for is any knocking, any play or a grindy sort of feeling that suggests the bearings are worn out or damaged. This particular one is actually quite smooth, but knowing how this has been ridden, I'm thinking it might have some damage on the inside, so we're going to have a look at that shortly. But most importantly at this stage is that there is no play, and the reason for that is when you look to see if a wheel is true or not, if it has any play at the axle, it could be misleading what you see at the rim, and you need to be a bit more accurate when you're looking for that damage at the rim end. So in this case it works, it's not the best, but it's going round. So we're going to put this in a wheel jig and we're going to start inspecting the rim on here. Now I'm fully aware that a lot of you won't have wheel jigs or access to wheel jigs, so you can do this by using your bike, by using the frame and basically just monitoring the rim as it rotates around there. But for ease of use, I'm going to show you this in our wheel jig. Okay, so first up, you want to be inspecting the rims of the actual wheel itself. So rims themselves are very important. Firstly, they form part of the structure of the actual wheel, and of course they hold your tyres on as well. So you need to work your way around and you're looking for any sort of scarring to the rim, anything that could be a crack. Look around the eyelets, make sure the nipples and the eyelets area is not damaged in any kind of way. And what you're looking for is any hop up and down, any side to side movement or any actual dents and dings in the sidewall of the rim. Now, if your tyres have stayed inflated in this process, this is a particular thing to note for tubeless setup, then you may have got away with it, but it's quite common to find dents on the sidewalls of rims. Now this tends to happen if you hit rocks or roots or anything else very hard like a square edged impact, and it simply folds those sidewalls over. Now it's not really a fault of the rim, this can just happen as a result of mountain biking, and it's something very common in downhill and enduro just because of the way the bikes are ridden extremely hard on quite severe terrain. Now it's possible to continue riding a rim like this as long as it still enables your tyre to stay inflated. If it doesn't and you have got issues with that, maybe it's not allowing the tyre to remain seated and have an airtight seal, something you can do is straighten out these dings and dents manually using a flat adjustable spanner. Now it's really important to note that the rims themselves are obviously made from aluminium, they're quite soft. Now aluminium doesn't like to be bent around too much. Once it's been bent it becomes, or is in danger of becoming brittle. So you only really want to do this if it's a last resort to make sure your tyre can stay sealed. So I would recommend actually leaving it alone unless that is a problem. Only do this as a last resort and be extremely careful when you do this. Now the key to any wheels staying properly true and well tensioned is the fact that all of the spokes need to have an equal tension. Equal tension equals a strong and safe wheel. Now over the time of riding mountain bikes, certain attributes of riding can really affect the wheel itself. Just for example, if you landed a jump sideways, you could buckle the rim, and what that would mean in terms of the actual wheel is if the rim is twisted in one direction, you're going to get some spokes that are pulled incredibly tight and other spokes that end up being quite baggy. Now this can also happen if, for example, your rear derailleur is pulled into the spokes, it can damage them. Sticks, there's a whole number of things that can affect this, so it's worth working your way around a wheel set and just checking that the spokes feel roughly tensioned all the way around and make sure they feel fairly similar. If there's anything that feels extremely loose or extremely tight, then you need to take a second look. Now spoke tension is something that you really do need to adhere to, and you do need some specialist tools to get an accurate reading on spoke tension, like one of these spoke tension meters from Park. But well aware, this is a very specialist tool and something that a wheel builder would have. Most people don't have these at home, so you're going to have to use your good old hands to get a feel of this. Now something that's very important to tell you with any sort of spokes and any sort of wheel advice is that generally when you're adjusting spoke nipples in order to take the wheel to one side or the other, you should really be doing this in quarter of a turn at a time. Now with a wheel like this where the spoke is that loose, really you need to nip it up tight first and then start doing your quarter turns from there. Something else to take into account is you don't always want to be tightening spokes. Sometimes you need to loosen the opposite spokes to have the same effect. If you end up just tightening spokes to eradicate a side-to-side problem, then you're going to have the effect of pulling that edge of the rim closer to the hub, and you can actually egg shape a wheel slightly by doing this. It's a very fine tuning thing, and wheel building itself is quite an advanced skill. We will be looking directly at doing a wheel truing class at some point down the line soon, but for now this is just how you make sure that those spokes, you nip them up tight and they're not going to cause you any additional hassle. And the last but final thing you need to remember when truing wheels is to have the correct spoke key. Now you get different sizes of spoke nipple out there, so it is vital that you have the correct one, because spoke nipples themselves come in different materials and they can be very easily damaged. Now typically hand-built wheels tend to have brass nipples, but it's very common also to have aluminium nipples or alloy nipples. Now those can be very easily rounded off, and if you do round one off, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to loosen it, and in which case the way to get it out again would be to cut that spoke. Then you're going to have to put a fresh spoke in with a fresh nipple and do this whole process again. So start the right way and get the correct spoke key. You only ever need to buy these once for your set of wheels and you can continue using them. Now you can get some good value for money multi-spoke keys that will do a bunch of different sizes, but they're never quite as easy to use as a dedicated single spoke key. So do a little bit of research, get the one that fit your wheels and you're good to go. Now as part of the process of tightening up spokes, there's also something you need to do afterwards, otherwise they're just going to undo themselves, and it's called relieving the tension. Now when you tighten up a spoke nipple, the actual spoke itself can twist. It doesn't always happen, but on occasion the spoke will twist. And what will happen if you don't relieve that tension is you go for a ride, it will unravel itself and it'll just be back to where it was to start with. So there's a couple of different ways you can relieve that tension. You can do it manually by literally just squashing those spokes together, work your way around the whole wheel until that's done. Then you're going to need to check for trueness again, and if necessary make a few of those quarter turn adjustments just to keep it running true. The other method is a bit more extreme, so if you bear with me, you're going to have to come down here for this angle. And what you would do with this is actually lean the actual axle of the hub on the floor itself and put your body weight against the rim. Now take note that it's okay to do this with the cassette side, but if you've got a disc rotor on like you have on this side, you might want to remove this first, otherwise you could damage that. But I just want to accentuate the point of how you would do this. You'd work your way around the rim, and what you're listening for is any, there you go, little pop like that, of those spokes just unraveling themselves and settling in. Then it's a case of returning it to the work stand, just double checking it's still running true. You might need to make a few minute adjustments and then repeat this process, then you're good to go. Now this doesn't apply to a front wheel of course, but with the rear wheel you have the cassette on there. You have the mechanism on the inside with either a ratchet or a system of pawls. You of course have the axle going through with bearings. Now all of this takes a lot of abuse out on the trail. So I recommend taking the cassette off. Now this is a really good one to show because this is a Shimano pattern cassette and freewheel on there. And sometimes you can get damage to the actual freewheel body where the cassette actually cuts into that. And if that's the case, then A, it's going to become very difficult to remove it in future, and B, it can actually further damage itself. And I've even heard in extreme cases of individual teeth actually being able to spin all the way around where they've managed to cut all the way through. So we're going to inspect that and make sure it's safe. And we're actually going to take a look at the pawls on the inside of this system as well, because there's something that can stick, and not only does it add friction to the drivetrain, but it means you won't get that pickup and it won't be as accurate and safe as it should be. If the pawls themselves are sticking through maybe gunk and other stuff that's on the inside there, the little springs aren't going to allow them to push out and lock into place. And it's the locking in place that makes the transmission work and stops you going over the handlebars. Now to remove a cassette, it's essentially the same on SRAM and Shimano systems. You need a cassette lock ring tool, and that slots into this part right there. And then you either want a vise or an adjustable spanner in order to hold that. But you also need a chain whip. And the reason for that is if you just try to undo this, the cassette naturally rotates. The chain whip is what you use to counter that and hold it in place like a vice. Make sure you use the correct tools for the job. There are various different sizes on the market. In this case, got an 11-speed chain, so you've got to make sure the chain on the chain whip correlates to that cassette. And of course, that you're using the correct lock ring tool. There's various different options available on the market. So as you might be able to see behind me, I've taken off most of the sprockets that come off in single pieces. And then you've got the bottom of the cassette here that slides off in a single sort of spider. Now you get some cassettes that are in one big piece and others that are of this design. There's various on the market. One of the downsides of this design is because these sprockets are quite narrow, they actually cut into the surface of the actual freehub body itself and become hard to take off. And as I mentioned earlier, in extreme cases, they can actually cut all the way through and spin, which is really, really dangerous. So if yours starts looking like this, you need to do something about it. This one will actually be okay for a while, but what I'd recommend doing is just filing the edges of those sort of little divots that are left in there so you can get your cassette on and off safely. But I definitely recommend looking into getting another freehub body. And perhaps when the time comes to upgrade your cassette, look at getting something that's more or less in a single piece. I actually quite like the SRAM system because you don't get that with the SRAM system. This is one of the things that you do get with certain Shimano cassettes on this style freehub body. Now next up, you want to be removing your freehub body so you can clean it, inspect it and make sure those pawls are clean, lubricated and not contaminated in a way that's going to stop them working. Now this particular hub actually has a ratchet system on the inside, but I've got another hub just here with the pawl system. So I'm just going to show you the two systems so you can know how to basically clean them and make sure they're working nicely. Now the first thing to do is get the end caps off. Now there's various different models on the market, so they all come off in different ways. Some unscrew against the cap that would be on the other side, on the non-drive side, or some, in the case of this DT Swiss one, are push on. Now this one actually was easy to loosen, but more often than not, you'll actually need to put these in a vise to actually get them out. But make sure you use soft jaws on that vise so you don't damage the end cap. But then it's simply a case of removing things and now very carefully just sliding off that freehub body. You have the body itself, and you can see the bearings on the inside there. And you can see the ratchet, well, what the ratchet clicks into there, the serrated teeth. It's pretty dirty, so I'm going to give that a good bit of a clean. I want to make sure the bearings are still running nice and smoothly. If they need changing, that's a whole different detailed job, and I'm going to do how to change bearings on a whole hub system in another video soon, but that's quite detailed, so it does warrant its own video. This video, we just want to make sure this is running nice and smoothly and doing its job correctly. So next thing to do is remove that spring. Note the fact its smaller side goes into the hub, so remember that from when you're putting it back on. Remove those two ratchet rings, and there's another spring just on the inside here, which you may need a screwdriver just to pull out from the hub. And that one goes small side towards the ratchet. And there we go, you have your axle running through the middle there, which on this bike is actually nice and smooth. I don't need to really be too concerned about the bearings, but I am concerned about the gunk that's around there. So I want to clean that out and make sure it's running smooth. Now something that's really important to note, because you can see the edge of the cartridge bearings in a hub when you do this, is not to use degreaser directly on it. Put some degreaser on a rag, use that to wipe around and clean those surfaces up, and then you want to put some very light lube on the inside there. So the same goes for the ratchet rings. Give them a decent clean. Make sure there's no sort of grime stuck in there, and then they should look good as new. So there we go, just those internal components are nice and clean. The bearings actually in this freehub body are really nice, so there's no need to replace those at this stage. But I said earlier, we will go and do that in a later video. What you need to do now is put some very thin grease on those ratcheting rings, reassemble it back together, and then get that cassette back on. If your hub has a more traditional pawls as opposed to the ratchet system, similar concept, you want to make sure that the serrated ring on the inside is nice and clean, and that those pawls will actually move completely unhindered. Now with pawls, you don't want to be using grease really, you really want an oil for this, because you want them to have the least resistance possible so they can spring back into place. If you had a thick oil on those pawls, then they might not, on their springs, return into their locked position, which would mean they're not going to lock into that ratchet, and therefore when you go to pedal it could slip. So make sure that that is always clean and gunk free. Not looking like this one, that means. So lastly but not least, when inspecting your wheels, is checking over your tyres. Now you want to be looking through the tyre tread, making sure it's not adversely worn out. You want to be looking for any damage to the casing. Look for things like slashes, notches, nicks, anything that can grow into a bigger problem later on. If they're quite small, put some vulcanizing solution in them, and that can sort of keep them at bay. But if it's gone through the actual casing and it's actually a slash, it's either throw the tyre away or try and attempt to fix. Now I made a pretty cool video on stitching up a tyre sidewall slash, and you can keep using that tyre, and we could even set this one up tubeless afterwards. So click on the link below this video straight to that one. But hopefully your tyre won't have that, which means there's just a few more things to check. Check your amount of sealant that's in there. If your rims, like these ones, have rim tape, definitely check the condition of that, because it does have a habit of after a while starting to peel up or deteriorate, which will mean at some point your tyre will lose pressure. So that's really frustrating. So now is your opportunity with the tyre off to check that. And also one final thing, bit of a bugbear of mine, is when the little tubeless valve stems actually get clogged up. So if you actually remove the valve core, give it a clean with some brake cleaner, isopropyl alcohol, contact cleaner, that sort of thing. Give it a bit of lube, put it back in place, everything will be sweet. So that is the basics of wheel care, something that all of you I'm sure will be able to do at home just to make sure your wheels are running nice and smoothly. Of course, we will be going into a bit more depth. We're going to be doing a wheel truing video and also how to change those hub bearings. But for a couple more videos in the meantime, click down here for tubeless mistakes. It's all the classics, it's easy to get wrong and some great information on how to get it right, more importantly. And click down here for how to stitch up a slash in a tyre sidewall, more useful wheel interaction. Of course, click on the round globe as always to subscribe to GMBN Tech. And if you like working on your bikes and you like getting your wheels straight, give us a thumbs up.